Wyoming Territory, June 1883, the wind carried dust and the cries of a woman about to turn around and give up. Jovie Darnell stood on the edge of the split log platform just outside the town of Rattlesnake Hollow, her grip on the leather strap of her valise so tight her knuckles were white. The train she'd come in on still hissed behind her, steam curling into the dry sky, but she had no place to go. No one was waiting. The letter had said a man named Thomas had sent for her. A rancher. A widower with 2 children in need of a mother. But when she stepped off that train, there was no sign of him. No man with anxious eyes. No children peeking from behind his legs, only strangers. She waited. 1 hour. Then 2. By the 3rd, she asked around. Thomas Granger had died 3 weeks back, trampled by his own horse during a storm. No one had sent word to the agency. The postmaster just gave her a look halfway between pity and guilt and said, "Sorry, miss, no one's coming." Jovie's knees nearly gave. She found her way to a bench and sat down hard, hands shaking in her lap. She had sold everything in Missouri to come here. She had nothing but the dress on her back, 2 changes of clothes in her bag, and the pair of boots she had not broken in yet. Her last coin had been spent on the train ticket. She had no home to return to. "I do not cry," she whispered to herself, biting the inside of her cheek so hard it bled. She was still sitting there when the shadow fell across her boots. "You the mail-order bride?" a man asked. She looked up into the blinding sun. The man wore a wide-brimmed hat with dust baked into the felt and a short beard that looked like it had been forgotten for a few days too long. His eyes were a deep brown, sharp but not unkind. His voice was low and even, calm. "Yes," she said, rising to her feet. "But he died." He scratched his jaw. "I heard. I came into town for feed and saw you sittin' there." "It ain't right, a woman left like that." "I will be fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "I will find work somewhere." His gaze moved over her slow, careful, not leering. He saw the raw skin on her heels from walking, the way her hands trembled when she brushed her skirt. She was not fine. He took off his hat. "Name's August Zellner. I live about 15 miles north, got a small spread and 2 kids who eat more than they should. I never ordered a bride," he said slowly, voice rough, "but I would have asked for you." Jovie stared at him, her breath caught. "I am not," she started. "I ain't askin' you to marry me right now," he said. "I am asking if you want a place to sleep tonight, a hot meal, somewhere safe to think." She hesitated. Her pride was wounded, but not enough to keep her out in the cold Wyoming wind. "All right," she said quietly. "Just for tonight." He nodded once, then took her valise without asking. She followed him to his wagon, where a girl with sun-blonde hair and a boy with a slingshot in his hand were sitting in the back. "Kids," August said, "this is Miss Jovie. She is riding with us." The boy, about 9, narrowed his eyes. "She your new wife?" "No," August said, no hesitation. "She is our guest." The girl, maybe 7, grinned. "I like your boots." Jovie smiled for the first time all day. "Thank you." They rode north with the wind at their backs. The land around them opened wide, all sagebrush and red rock, with mountains rising far in the distance. Jovie did not speak much, and neither did August, but it was a quiet that did not weigh her down. By the time they reached the cabin, small, clean, with smoke curling from the chimney, it was dusk. August helped her down from the wagon, then pointed toward the front door. "You go on in. Kids will show you where to wash." She nodded and stepped inside, heart thudding. Inside, the place smelled of wood smoke and stew. The children led her to a basin and a rag. Jovie scrubbed her hands, her face, the dried sweat from her neck. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair a mess, but her eyes looked steadier than they had that morning. Dinner was simple potatoes, beans and cornbread, but hot. August did not ask questions. He just passed her the butter and made sure her cup was always full of water. After the children were asleep, Jovie stood awkwardly near the door, unsure where she belonged. "I can sleep in the barn," she offered. "No need," August said. "There is a cot by the stove." "You will be warm there," she nodded, then hesitated. "Thank you for tonight." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You looked like you was almost gone when I found you. I could not let that happen." Jovie felt the sting of tears behind her eyes but blinked them back. He turned to go, then paused. "You really would have said yes to that man." "I needed a home," she said, "and I was not afraid of working for it." He nodded once, then disappeared into the back room. She lay down on the cot, the blanket rough but clean, and stared at the ceiling until sleep took her. In the morning, the sun was already high when she woke. The smell of frying eggs filled the room. She sat up, blinking. August stood at the stove, flipping eggs with one hand while the other held a baby chick that the girl Vera, she remembered, was trying to feed crumbs to. "I can help," Jovie said, rising quickly. He glanced over his shoulder. "If you want to," she did. She wanted to. And just like that, she stayed another night, and another. By the end of the week, she was helping Vera with her lessons and fixing the hem on August's shirts. One night, she caught him watching her from the porch, his hand resting on the door frame. "You still thinking of going back?" he asked. She stepped outside into the cool air, eyes scanning the stars. "I do not know where back is anymore," he nodded. "Well, you got a place here, for as long as you want it." She looked at him, really looked. "I might want it longer than I thought." The first thunderstorm came 6 days after Jovie arrived. The wind slapped against the pane glass, driving rain sideways across the fields, and lightning cracked so close it lit the cabin like midday. Vera sat curled beside the hearth, arms around her knees while her brother tried to act unmoved, though he flinched each time the thunder rolled. August had gone out before the worst hit, trying to coax a sick calf from the mud near the far fence. He hadn't returned by the time the sky split open in earnest. Jovie stood by the door, watching the dark through a narrow crack. She said nothing, but her hands twisted the hem of her apron. "I heard Pa once had to pull a mule from a creek in a storm," Vera said, voice small. "He came back with a limp and a scar across his cheek." Jovie crossed the room and sat beside her. "August doesn't strike me as the sort who gives up halfway." The girl looked up. "You call him August." "I suppose I do." The boy let go of the curtain and turned. "You call everyone by their first name," Jovie smiled faintly. "Only the ones who make the world feel steadier." The door opened not long after, the wind dragging rain in with it. August stepped through, soaked through and streaked with mud, a rope slung over his shoulder. His coat clung to him, water dripping from his hat brim. "Calf's up," he said, shutting the door behind him. "Stubborn little thing." Without a word, Jovie grabbed a towel from the peg and pressed it into his hands. "Don't just stand there," she said. "You'll catch your death." He didn't argue. He peeled off the coat, boots, and shirt near the door, then disappeared into the back to change. When he returned, his hair still damp, he found her ladling warm broth into a tin cup. "For your trouble," she said, offering it. "And because I don't think you ate lunch." He took it from her without a word, the warmth pooling in his palms. The children had gone quiet again, lulled by the storm's retreat and the rhythm of the fire. "I found a cedar tree split clean down the middle," he said after a while. "Must have taken the bolt right after it passed over us." Jovie tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Seems like the world's always breaking and mending in turns." He met her gaze. "And which are you doing?" She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice was low. "Trying to learn the mending part." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had a shape of its own. The next morning, the sky was clear again, the grass glistening with leftover rain. August saddled the gelding and tapped on the doorframe where Jovie was kneading dough at the table. "Ride with me a while, if you're willing." She wiped her hands on a cloth and nodded. Vera was helping her brother with sums, and both looked up when she stepped outside with her shawl. August said nothing as he helped her mount behind him, his hand steady at her waist. The horse picked a slow pace along the ridge, hooves soft against the damp earth. They rode past the lower pasture, where the calf stood wobbling but upright, and down toward the bluff that overlooked the river bend. When they stopped, the view stretched wide. Cottonwoods in bloom, water glinting like hammered tin, and far off, the suggestion of another ranch's fence line. "This land was my brother's," he said, breaking the quiet. "He died in the war. I came west after and took what he left." Jovie let that settle before speaking. "You don't talk about him much." "No one asks." She turned slightly. "I'm asking?" August let out a breath. "He was younger, reckless, smiled too much. I tried to keep him out of it, but he went anyway. Never came home." She looked down at her hands. "My older sister married a man with a voice like honey and fists like iron. We thought she'd be safe. She wasn't. I left when I could." He didn't reach for her, didn't offer platitudes. Just let the truth sit between them. "Then I suppose we're both building something new," he said after a long while, "from what's left." Jovie looked out across the land. "You've made something steady here, that's rare." He turned to watch her, the sunlight catching the side of her face. "You're part of it now." She didn't answer. But her hand settled lightly against his arm as they turned the horse back toward home. The smell of wet pine lingered in the yard for days after the storm, and the land, softened by the rain, yielded easier to August's boots as he repaired the south fence line. Jovie watched from the porch, a basket of mending beside her, fingers busy with thread but eyes drawn to the slow, deliberate way he moved. He didn't speak much when he worked, but his silence wasn't the kind that shut people out. It made room. Inside, Vera and her brother were stringing dried corn kernels onto twine to hang above the hearth, their voices quiet with the kind of peace Jovie hadn't known children could grow into. She set her mending aside and stepped down into the yard. "I can hold the post steady for you," she said, setting her skirt behind her knees. August didn't glance up. "You sure that's how you want to spend your day?" "I'd rather be useful than still." He passed her the brace and nodded toward the next break in the fence. "That one's leaning." "We'll fix it first." The air smelled of turned earth and damp wood. They worked without hurry, her gloved hands gripping the timber while he drove the nails in. When they paused to rest, Jovie sat on the grass, brushing sawdust from her skirts. "You always know what you're going to do?" she asked, watching how the wind tugged gently at the collar of his shirt. "No," he said, "but I know what I won't." She waited. "I won't leave the land to rot. I won't lie to my children. And I won't bring someone into this house unless I mean to keep them safe." She looked at him then, really looked, her gaze steady. "And what about yourself?" He squinted into the sun. "I get by. You don't think that's a poor trade?" "Giving everything and not asking anything back." August leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't think much about what I deserve, just what's needed." A long silence passed between them, filled only by the soft rustle of grass and the distant lowing of a cow. "You knew I wasn't going anywhere that first night," she said after a while, "even before I did." "I saw the way you held yourself," he said, "like a woman who's been told too many times she doesn't belong, but you stood anyway." Jovie's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, dirt under her nails, calluses beginning to form where the needle used to prick her. "I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, someone would keep me," she said quietly. "Not love, just keep." August stood and offered her his hand. When she took it, he pulled her up slow. "I won't keep you," he said. "You're not a thing to be kept." He looked at her, eyes dark beneath the brim of his hat. "But I'd walk beside you if you'd let me." Something inside her settled at those words, like a beam finding its footing. Back at the house, Vera called out from the porch, waving a folded page in the air. The post rider came. August took the letter at the gate, his brow furrowed as he read, then passed the page to Jovie. It was from the agency in Missouri, a brief, formal line stating her file had been closed due to unconfirmed placement. No further matches would be arranged. She folded the paper carefully. "Seems like I'm no longer promised to anyone." "You ever think you were?" he asked. She looked at him, her voice steady. "I did once, but not anymore." That evening, after the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Jovie lingered in the kitchen, drying the last of the dishes. August stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the night gather across the field. "I was thinking," he said without turning, "we ought to fix the roof before first snow." She leaned a hip against the counter. "We," he turned then, slow, "if you're staying." I am, she said, the words falling easy now. And if you're asking what I think you are, I am. She crossed the room, closing the space between them. I never wanted to be chosen out of pity, she said, her voice low. I wanted to be seen. August reached for her hand, calloused palm warm around her fingers. I saw you, he said. You were almost gone, but I saw you. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but he held her hand like it meant something, and it did. By mid-July, wildflowers dotted the hills beyond the pasture, and the days turned long enough that supper dishes were cleared before the sun dipped fully behind the ridgeline. The heat settled into everything: the wood grain of the porch steps, the rafters above the bed, the folds of Jovie's dress. She rose early, before the air grew thick, and took to walking the fence rows with Vera, who had taken to asking questions faster than Jovie could answer them. Did you ever ride a train before you came here? The girl asked as they stepped over a patch of thistle. I had, Jovie said, brushing her palm along the top rail. Once when I was 16, my aunt lived east in a town with more brick than trees. Did you like it? Jovie smiled faintly. I liked watching the world move past the window without having to chase it. Vera nodded like she understood, though her boots were still too big and her shoulders not yet shaped by loss. They stopped near the creek bend where the fence turned north. The girl crouched to twist a daisy into her braid. Pa's been quieter since the letter came, she said, not looking up. But he watches you like he's thinking something important. Jovie didn't answer. She pressed her fingers to a loose nail in the fence post and nudged it back into place with a stone. That night, August brought out a bundle from the loft. He laid it on the table and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a bolt of muslin, pale blue with a faded edge, and a square of calico barely larger than a handkerchief. I meant to trade it for horseshoes last winter, he said, not quite meeting her eye. But the smith had more use for salt, so it came back with me. Jovie ran her fingers along the fabric, soft from age. It's good cloth. I thought maybe you'd know what to do with it. She folded it carefully. I could make a Sunday dress for Vera. And a shirt for you if I piece it right. He nodded once. I'd wear it. She looked up at him. You don't have to give me things. August rested his hand on the back of the chair. I know. But I want to. Later, while the children slept and the wind moved slow through the open windows, Jovie sat sewing by lamplight. August stepped in from the porch, his shoulders dusted with chaff from the barn. He poured water into the basin and washed without turning toward her. My sister wrote me once, he said, drying his hands on a cloth. After the war, before she married a man in Idaho, she said I'd never build a life unless I stopped waiting for it to come find me. Jovie set her needle down. Did you write back? I didn't, he said. But I kept the letter. She crossed the room and picked it up from where it was tucked in the edge of the bookshelf. The paper had yellowed, the creases worn thin. She didn't unfold it. Why keep it? She asked. Because it was the first time someone told me the truth without trying to soften it. Jovie looked up at him. Has anyone done that since? You did, he said. When you said you weren't afraid of work, when you didn't ask for pity, just a place to stand. She stepped closer. And you gave me that. His voice dropped. I'd give more if you let me. Jovie laid her hand over his. I'm not waiting anymore either. He reached up, brushed the hair from her cheek with the back of his fingers. She leaned into the touch, and when his mouth found hers, it wasn't rushed or uncertain. It was quiet and sure, like everything else he did. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his chest. I never thought I'd find peace in a place that didn't know my name, she whispered. You gave it your name, he said. Now it knows. Outside, the cicadas hummed low and the last light faded from the sky. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, not needing to. The house behind them held warmth and breath and the sound of children turning in their sleep. And the future for the first time felt like something they could shape together. The morning they walked to the church north of the river, the sun was already high and the cottonwoods cast long, dappled shadows across the trail. Vera wore a dress stitched from the muslin August had given Jovie. The hem let out just enough to last another season. Her brother carried a polished stone in his pocket, a worry charm he claimed helped him sit still during the sermon. August didn't speak much on the walk, and Jovie didn't press him. The quiet between them had shifted lately, not absence, but something full, like the hush before a harvest. She walked beside him, her hand brushing his once, then again. He didn't pull away. The church was a squat wooden structure, built with more grit than symmetry. The pews creaked under the weight of neighbors they'd barely spoken to before. August sat with Vera between him and her brother, and Jovie settled beside them, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Afterward, a woman with silver-threaded hair and a pressed shawl approached them near the well. She looked from August to Jovie, then back again. "You're the Zellners," she said. August dipped his chin. "Yes, ma'am." The woman's eyes lingered on Jovie's face. "You're the one who came off the train last month. I remember. You looked like you hadn't slept in days." "I hadn't," Jovie said without apology. The woman gave a short nod. "You look rested now." She turned and walked away without another word. Jovie watched her go, then looked up at August. "That was strange. She's been a midwife here since before the war," he said. "She doesn't ask questions she don't already know the answers to." That night, Jovie sat on the porch steps after the children had gone to bed. The stars came out slow, scattered between wisps of high cloud. August joined her, his shoulder brushing hers as he sat. "You sure this is the life you want?" he asked, voice low. "Not just the life," she said. "The people in it." He turned toward her. "I've been thinking on something." She didn't speak, only waited. "I could ask you to marry me," he said. "But I don't want to make you feel like it's a trade. You've worked harder than anyone I've known, and I wouldn't ask you to prove anything more." Her hand found his where it rested on his knee. She laced their fingers together. "August," she said, "I've made my own choices since the day I stepped off that train. If I say yes, it's because I want to build a life with you, not because I owe you one." He looked at their joined hands. "Then I'm asking, plain and true, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said. Plain and true. They married 3 weeks later, in the same church where the pews still creaked and the window glass held the smell of old oil and sun-warmed wood. Vera carried a bundle of wildflowers, and her brother wore a shirt Jovie had sewn from leftover scraps. The preacher kept it short, but August's hand never left hers. They walked home as a family, the wagon bouncing steady over the trail, the sky wide and clear. By late August, the fields had gone gold around the edges, and Jovie started keeping track of the stores in the root cellar. She and August stood shoulder to shoulder canning apples, sealing the jars with wax while the children counted out lids and sorted jars. On the last day of harvest, August brought in the final crate of potatoes and set it down with a long breath. "That's the last of it," he said. Jovie wiped her hands on her apron and looked around the cellar, lined now with rows of jars and sacks. "We'll do fine this winter." He stepped close, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "We'll do more than fine." That night they lay in bed listening to the wind outside, dry leaves skittering across the roof. The lamp was out, but the firelight flickered faintly across the floorboards. "Do you ever miss what you left behind?" August asked. "No," she said. "What I needed was never behind me." He pulled her close, his hand resting over hers. "You've made this place more than it ever was. We made it together." In the months that followed, the snow came early, but the house stayed warm. August built a new cradle for the front room, not because they needed it yet, but because he liked the feel of the wood under his hands. Vera began reading aloud in the evenings, and her brother took to whittling small animals from scraps of kindling. Jovie kept the ledger with a steady hand, and August never missed a night by her side. By spring, the land outside bloomed again. The cabin stood strong, and the family inside it was whole. And in the quiet hours between dusk and sleep, when the children's breaths were even and the fire burned low, Jovie and August would lie side by side, fingers entwined, hearts steady. They had found not just shelter, but a home stitched from hardship and shaped by love. A place neither had planned for, but both had chosen, and they never looked back.